My name is Ethan Carter. In 1912, my unit was sent into the mountains and never officially came back. The report says we got lost in the snow and found our way out by skill and luck. That's a lie. The truth is, we were bait. One of us was a traitor. Our own command never meant for us to return. And the only reason I ever saw my wife and my 2 children again is a snow leopard the Army erased from history. I was not born a hero. I was born in the mountains of Montana, near a small mining town the big maps forget. My father worked his body into the ground, my mother worked her knees into prayer. As a boy, I thought the mountains were God's own ramparts around our little house. In light winters, like the one that would one day decide my life, a thin sheet of snow brushed the peaks, leaving dark rock exposed like bones. I'd stand at the window and stare up, imagining a ghost cat watching us from the ridges, a white shape that came and went with the snow. My mother would lay a hand on my shoulder and tell me, "God sees every creature that falls, Ethan, even the ones no one else notices." Back then, I believed her. Back then, I believed a lot of things. Years ground that faith down. My father drank more than he spoke. Debts arrived faster than pay. Men in uniforms came to town talking about honor, about a changing world, about preparing before the real war comes. They said there were units for men like me who knew rock and snow, who weren't afraid of heights or bad weather. They said I could serve my country, clean the family name, send money home. They did not say I might be sent into the mountains as a test animal. By 1912, I wore their uniform, a private at first, then a sergeant in a special mountain reconnaissance unit. 10 men with strong lungs, good boots, and the wrong kind of luck. On paper, our mission was simple: explore a disputed high border before anyone admitted a war was coming. Find passes, test tactics in realistic conditions. Later, in a thin folder with my name misspelled, I would read the words "Live Field Experiment." Not operation, not rescue, experiment. There were 10 of us. Captain Marshall, our commander, worn down but sharp, a man who had seen enough to be tired of lies. Logan, the quiet observer, always writing in his small black notebook. Daniel, the believer, who carried a little Bible in his breast pocket. Ryan, the cynic, with a joke for every shell. Tom, the boy who had to stand on his toes to look like a man. And me, Ethan Carter, a mountain boy with a decent shot and a better sense of how stone and snow behave when they want you dead. I carried something else. A photograph. My family. Anna, my wife, in a simple dress, hair pulled back, smile soft but tired. Our son, Jacob, holding a wooden toy plane as if it could really fly. Our little girl May, hugging a stuffed kitten to her chest like it was alive. Before I left, Anna had gripped my hand tighter than any officer ever would and said, "Come back, Ethan. I don't need a medal. I need a husband, and they need a father. Come back better than you left, not just more broken." I said I would. I didn't know how. We marched into the mountains while the world pretended there was no war, only preparation. The air was thin. The winter was still young, a light white, dusting over dark rock, enough snow to slip on, not enough to soften a fall. The wind was sharp, but not yet murderous. That kind of weather lies to you. It looks survivable. It hides the traps well. The first day, we almost believed the story on our orders. We moved in single file, boots crunching thin snow over stone. I walked near the front, pointing out ledges, warning of loose rock. Captain Marshall listened, nodded, adjusted the route more on my word than the lines on his map. Logan walked in the middle, Notebook raised, pencil scratching, recording times, distances, jokes, complaints. All the little things men say when they think no one important is listening. That night, under a sky thick with stars and cold, we huddled in a shallow depression in the rock. We stacked stones against the wind, lit a small, carefully shielded fire. In the dance of black and white shadows, Tom told us how he'd lied about his age to enlist. "Didn't want to be the only boy in town without a uniform," he said, trying to sound proud. His hands shook when he said it. Ryan snorted. "Congratulations. Now you get to freeze to death with the rest of us." Daniel looked up from his Bible. "You don't have to die here, Ryan," he said quietly. "Not like this. Not inside." Ryan shook his head. If God cared, he'd have picked another test group. I pretended to ignore them, pulled out the photograph of Anna and the kids, and let my eyes linger until the lines blurred. Then I put it back, as if that could press them closer to my chest. On the second day, the lie of field exercise died. The first shell came without warning. A distant whistle, then the mountain itself seemed to explode beside us. Stone and snow blew outward. The shock hit my chest like a hammer. We dropped as one organism, not from courage, but from reflex. More shells followed, walking their way along the ridge, finding angles no map had warned us about. When the roar finally faded, 2 men didn't stand up. Harris, who'd shown me a picture of his dog the night before, lay twisted under a slab of rock. Another man simply wasn't there anymore. Where he'd stood, the snow was red and black. As we stared, Logan's pencil moved. "Day 2, he muttered. "First bombardment. 2 down." It sounded official, clinical. It sounded like he wasn't sure if he was writing for us or someone else. We dragged ourselves onward. The shells kept coming over the hours. Never enough to wipe us out, always enough to remind us someone on the other side knew exactly where we were. Too exactly. "Feels like they're walking us," Ryan said, panting between impacts. "Like the shells are hurting us somewhere." "Don't be ridiculous," Captain Marshall snapped, but his eyes were tight. "We are not animals." I wasn't so sure. Animals run free. We marched where lines on a paper told us to. The third day, the mountain itself joined in. We entered a broad, shallow basin surrounded by rock. The snow lay thin but even, too even. No breaks, no bare stones, just a soft, white carpet that didn't match the rest of the terrain. My skin crawled. "This is wrong," I said. "A drift like this doesn't form here. Not with the wind we've had." The captain glanced at the maps, at the sky, at me. "Orders say through the basin," he replied. "We're behind schedule." I wanted to argue. Instead, I adjusted my pack and stepped in. The explosion that followed came from below. One of the men vanished in a flash of white and black and red. The blast blew a crater in the thin snow, threw shards of metal and rock into everyone near him. Tom fell backward, screaming, a spray of dark on his leg. The basin filled with smoke and dirt. "Mines!" someone yelled. Too late. We scrambled back the way we came, dragging Tom, half carrying him. Behind us, another mine went off in sympathy, tossing rocks like dice. When we finally collapsed behind a ridge of stone, 2 more were dead. Tom's lower leg was shredded, bone gleaming white in the dirt. He stared at me, eyes wild. "It hurts, Sergeant," he gasped. "It hurts so much." I could see the question in every other man's eyes. Would we leave him? That night, crouched under a ledge while the wind scraped over our position, the fear turned into something else. Anger. We weren't supposed to cross that basin. I said quietly to Captain Marshall, nodding toward the minefield. Someone knew it was wired. He didn't look at me right away. Someone always knows, he answered eventually, and someone else doesn't. Guess which one we are. Later, alone with my thoughts, I noticed something that had lurked in the corner of my mind since the shells began. A pattern. We'd stop to rest, Logan would write, glance up at a distant ridge, where a faint glint shimmered like glass or metal. Not long after we moved, the shelling would find us again, closer each time. Right, glance, impact, right, glance, impact. There are coincidences, and there are habits. The next day, the mountain took our captain. We moved along a narrow ledge, a strip of stone barely wide enough for one man at a time, a wall of rock on our right, nothing but air on our left. The light winter had left a thin smear of snow that turned each step into a choice between trust and slipping. A shell hit the cliff above us, too high to kill, perfectly placed to break. The mountain shuddered. Stones rained down, some no bigger than a fist, one big enough to crack the ledge beneath Captain Marshall's feet. The rock gave way. For a second, he stood on nothing. Then gravity reclaimed him. We lunged for the rope, hauled the next man back. When it was over, only a frayed end hung over the edge. He didn't even have time to scream. We made it to a slightly wider shelf before we broke. Men cursed, shouted, blamed. Ryan kicked his pack, then kicked the rock, then kicked nothing. Tom moaned through clenched teeth. Daniel tried to speak and was shouted down. And Logan opened his notebook and wrote. Something in me snapped. I strode over and tore it from his hands. "Hey," he yelped. "That's official." "Who's official?" I demanded. "Ours, or theirs." The pages fluttered under my fingers. Dates, coordinates, weather, casualties. On the surface, it was a log any unit might keep. But in the margins, small symbols repeated. Circles, lines, little arrows. Certain phrases underlined. Next to our route for that day's march, a note in tighter writing. Command approves live test of Northern Pass. No recovery assets committed. Observe psychological response. Further back, they still trust me. They think I write for us, not for them. My vision tunneled. Who are you writing for, Logan? He met my eyes, and for the first time, his mask slipped. For the future, he said. For someone who knows what has to be sacrificed to prevent a bigger slaughter. They told me if I did this right, my family would be safe. That I'd be safe. And the rest of us? I asked. He looked away. Someone always pays. Before I could decide whether to hit him, shoot him, or just keep reading, the mountain answered for me again. Shells slammed into the slopes around us, closer than ever. The ledge shook. We dove. The notebook flew from my hands, tumbling across the stone. I heard a cry, cut off sharply. When the world stopped moving, Logan lay twisted near a shattered rock, his notebook beside him, a dark hole in his chest. Maybe it was enemy fire. Maybe some hand higher up had decided he'd written enough. Maybe it was just another piece of random cruelty in a world that had too much of it already. I never found out. We buried what we could. We wrapped what we couldn't in blankets and left them where the snow might remember their shapes. Tom's leg was worse. We built a crude sled from broken boards and rope. Every meter we pulled him felt like 10. When night came again, so did the truth. We had radio gear. It sat in Ryan's pack. It had sat there the whole time. We'd been ordered not to use it unless absolutely necessary. "Radio gives away position," they said. "Use it," Ryan growled now. "If they don't know we're alive, they can't decide whether to leave us dead." We dragged the set out, patched wire, raised the antenna as best we could in the swirling fog. "This is Ridge Unit," I said into the crackling void. "We are down to 5 effectives and 1 critical. We are under sustained bombardment and mine threat. Request immediate extraction or fire support." Static stretched. Then a voice, distant and a little too calm. "Negative, Ridge Unit. You are outside current operational priority. Maintain position and continue reporting. Do not attempt unsanctioned movements. That is an order." "Unsanctioned movements?" Ryan hissed. "We're dying out here." I pressed the handset again. "Command, what are our extraction coordinates?" Static. Then the line went dead. There was no technical failure. We both heard the click of a deliberate disconnection. They didn't just send us into the mountains. They closed the door behind us. That night, as fog crept closer and the cold ate into bone, Daniel spoke up in the dimness under our rocky shelter. "Years ago," he said softly, "another unit was sent into mountains like these. That's what my uncle told me. They were cut off, just like us. No food, no orders, no way out. One night, in a light winter snow, they saw a white cat on the ridge. Some tried to shoot it. An avalanche took them. The rest followed it and found a pass that wasn't on any map." Ryan laughed bitterly. "And did your uncle also see angels in the bar after?" Daniel shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe Command just doesn't like stories where something other than themselves saves men." I lay there, eyes on the black rock above, mind on the torn pages of Logan's notebook, and the deadline on the radio. We weren't getting rescued. We weren't even supposed to ask. Around that thought, another rose. The memory of a child at a window, staring at a ridge and imagining a ghost cat watching back. The fog was thick in the morning, but something moved in it. We were preparing to move. If you could call 3 half-frozen men and a man on a sled moving, when I saw a shape on the ridge above us. At first, it was just darker fog. Then it stepped forward. A snow leopard. It shouldn't have been there. Not in those mountains, not in that war, not in that story. But there it was. Heavy shoulders, thick white-gray fur mottled with dark rosettes. Tail long and balanced, paws silent on the thin snow and bare rock. Even in the washed-out light, I could see the scar above its left eye. It stood and looked down at us, not like prey, not like enemy, just seeing. Then it turned and began to walk along the ridge, parallel to us, not away into some unreachable height, but tracing a path as if along an invisible line only it understood. Ryan's reaction was immediate. "We shoot it," he said. "Meat, fur. We can't eat stories." He raised his rifle. Daniel grabbed his arm. "Don't," he whispered. "You know what I said." "It's just an animal," Ryan growled. "The only ghost here is us." They both looked at me. I was in charge now, whether I'd wanted it or not. I raised my rifle too. Habit, training, fear. The sight fell across the snow leopard's body. It would have been so easy to squeeze. One more life taken in the name of survival. Instead, my mind filled with images: the crater in the basin, Tom's blood on the snow, Harris's laugh and his dog's picture, Captain Marshall's last half-second on the broken ledge, Logan's tiny letters neatly explaining how many of us they expected to lose, the click on the radio when they chose not to hear us. And behind all that, Anna's eyes when she said, "Come back," Jacob's wooden plane, May's stuffed kitten,
clutched like a promise. If I pulled that trigger, I would be one more man doing what was easy, because the world had told him it was necessary. One more man who believed that killing first was the only way to live. My finger froze. Then it relaxed. I lowered the rifle. "We follow it," I said. Ryan stared at me as if I'd gone mad. "Follow a cat?" "Maps are written by the same men who left us out here to die," I answered. "The last signals we followed led us into mines and bombs. This is the first guide we've seen that isn't trying to kill us." Jennings, the last surviving man who wasn't already half dead, spat. "You're insane. Downhill is where people are. Downhill is where roads are. We go down." He grabbed the front of Tom's sled and started dragging him toward what he thought was the valley. Fog swallowed them in seconds. We heard the sound not long after. Not a scream, not clearly human. A rumble, then a crack, then the roaring slide of snow and rock. When it stopped, there was only wind and a silence heavier than the mountain. We turned back to the ridge. The snow leopard still stood there, waiting. So we followed. We didn't climb directly up. We mirrored its path along a lower shelf, using what cover we could, eyes fixed on those distant, deliberate steps, whenever the fog thinned enough to show them. Where its paw prints appeared in thin snow, we stepped. Where there were none, we chose a different line. Twice we found deep cracks hidden under crusts of snow exactly where we might have put our feet without thinking. Once, in a patch of white that looked like any other, we saw the ugly metal teeth of another mine, exposed just enough to see because the winter hadn't been kind enough to bury it. At one point, voices drifted through the mist above us, not English. Shapes moved on a higher trail, enemy patrol, rifles slung, laughing at some joke we'd never hear. The snow leopard turned, took a lower line, threading us through boulders and broken ground until the voices faded. We weren't fast. Tom groaned with every bump of the sled. Daniel muttered exhausted prayers. Ryan said nothing, his gaze locked on the animal ahead, lips pressed into a thin line. I walked at the front, testing each foothold, feeling the stone beneath the snow, relying on instincts honed long before anyone gave me a rifle. I used every trick I knew from the mountains back home. I watched how the wind cut around ridges to guess where snow might be deeper or hiding something worse. I read the shape of drifts to see where they rested naturally and where they looked disturbed. I tasted the air for hints of wet rock, which meant hidden meltwater and unseen ice. I listened to the smallest sounds, the difference between snow compressing under solid ground and snow collapsing over a void. The snow leopard knew more. It moved without hesitation, as if the mountain itself shifted to meet it. After what felt like hours sucked out of a life, the fog tore open. We stepped out onto a broader ledge carved into the rock. Ahead, half built into the mountain, half crumbling from neglect, stood an old outpost, stone walls, a sagging roof, firing slits staring into nothing. No flags flew, no sentries stood, but signs of use were there. Empty ration tins, a cold stove, a telegraph wire leading inside. We stumbled in like ghosts. There was a cistern with water, a crate with just enough food to be called mercy. And in the corner, under a tarp, a working telegraph and a hand crank radio. I turned back to the ridge. The snow leopard stood on a higher rock, looking down. Same scar, same eyes. It held my gaze for one long second, the world narrowing to man and animal, prey and guide, sinner and something like grace. Then it turned and walked away along the mountain line into the fog and the past. We got the radio alive. Static fought us at first, then voices. "This is Ridge Unit," I said. "Remaining personnel requesting extraction and medical evacuation. Coordinates follow." There was a long pause. Too long. Then, "Those coordinates are beyond the test sector," a voice replied. "How did you reach that position?" "On foot," I said. "Through your test." Another pause. Then, "Stand by." When they came for us, it wasn't a rescue. It was an inspection. Back at the field headquarters, in a building far from the stone and wind, a man in a clean uniform sat behind a desk, empty, except for a few papers, and Logan's dried notebook. The walls were straight. The floor was level. It felt wrong. He flipped through the pages with gloved fingers. Some were missing where a knife had neatly cut them out. "You understand," he said, "that what happened out there was part of a controlled study." "Controlled?" I repeated. "We buried half our men in uncontrolled graves." He ignored that. High Command needed to know how an isolated unit would perform under conditions of incomplete support and hostile terrain. Your reactions, your cohesion, your improvisations are valuable data. "Is that why radio was cut when we called for help?" I asked. His jaw tightened, only slightly. "Communication lines in mountains are unreliable, Sergeant." We heard the click. Ryan muttered beside me. That was a human hand, not a rock slide. The officer looked at us like we were children who had seen behind a curtain and weren't meant to. Then he reached for a paper on his desk. "Officially," he said, "your unit was conducting pre-war field trials. You encountered unexpected enemy interference, suffered losses. And then, this is important, you navigated on your own to a previously unknown outpost using superior skill and discipline. That is the version which will go into the report. What about the part where we were sent into a mined basin with no extraction plan?" I asked. He didn't answer. "What about the part where someone in this building used Logan to feed our position to the enemy?" I pressed. He closed the notebook. "Logan acted outside his authority. His notes have been sanitized. His involvement will not be part of the official record." "And the snow leopard?" Daniel asked quietly. "What about him?" The officer's eyes flicked to Daniel, as if measuring how much pain he was in. "There are no animals in this report," he said. "Only men."
Men who followed orders and men who didn't. Your survival, Sergeant Carter, will be attributed to your leadership and your mountain skills. That should satisfy you. It didn't. He slid the notebook across the desk toward me. I picked it up. Whole sections were gone. Entire days ripped out. Lines I remembered reading by the light of a dying fire were missing. "You can keep your copy of the lie," he said. "The truth is being archived where it won't confuse the wrong people." "Wrong people?" I repeated. "Families," he said. "Journalists. Young men who might start to think they don't have to trust their commanders." He leaned back, lacing his fingers. "You have a choice, Sergeant. Take your medal. Take your discharge. Go home to that wife and those 2 children I see on your file. Or make trouble and watch how quickly paperwork can turn a survivor into a deserter." He smiled then. Not cruelly. Just like a man who knew the game and had already counted the pieces. "Which do you think they need more?" he asked. "A father or a ghost?" I took the medal. I took the discharge. I took what was left of my men. 3 broken bodies and more broken nights. And I got as far from their mountains as I could. We didn't go back to Montana. Orders got delayed. Papers went missing. Questions about travel restrictions during sensitive preparations got more dangerous the more we asked. It became clear that as long as we stayed under that flag, we were loose ends. So we crossed another border into a country that wanted our labor more than our silence, into valleys where the mountains looked different, but felt the same. We found a small village clinging to a high slope, a place where people knew how to mind their own business and respect a man who could read a storm before it hit. I wrote to Anna in careful, coded letters. Months later, when the world had bigger fires to watch than one missing sergeant, she arrived with Jacob and May, travel papers smudged with lies and stamped with indifference. When they stepped off that last cart and into the thin, cold air of our new life, I realized I had finally done one thing the men at desks hadn't planned for. I didn't die where they'd left me. At night, when the children were asleep in a house that creaked differently, but just as safely as the one back in Montana, I sat at a rough wooden table with Logan's torn notebook and my own blank pages. I wrote everything they didn't want remembered. I wrote about Harris and his dog, about Tom and his missing leg, and the first time he laughed again, years later, watching Jacob try to balance on a wooden fence. About Daniel, who still carries that little Bible, its pages now stained with more than just ink. About Ryan, who never fully forgave anyone, least of all himself, but who learned to listen to the wind before he spoke. And I wrote about a snow leopard with a scar over its left eye, walking the ridges of a war that didn't know what to do with miracles. The official version of 1912-1914 says our unit completed valuable pre-war field research. It says our losses were acceptable in light of tactical gains. It praises my leadership under stress and my exceptional use of terrain. It files us under lessons learned and moves on to bigger numbers. It does not say we were sent into a mined valley with no extraction plan so someone in a warm room could measure how long it takes men to stop believing in orders. It does not say they cut our radio when we asked to come home. It does not say someone among us was told to record our suffering for people who would never see our faces. It does not say those same people tried to erase us when we refused to die on schedule. And it sure as hell doesn't say that when maps, orders, and loyalties all failed, a snow leopard led us out of their experiment and into a life they could no longer control. You can call it coincidence. You can call it instinct. You can call it whatever helps you sleep at night. I call it the moment I stop believing survival belongs only to those who obey the loudest voice. My name is Ethan Carter. In 1912, my unit was sent into the mountains as a test no one was meant to pass. The report says we found our way out by skill and luck. That's still a lie. The truth is scattered in pages someone cut from a notebook, in tracks the snow has long since covered, in a few men who had to disappear into another country just to stay alive. And in the eyes of a snow leopard, the state decided the world should never hear about. What happened to the men who stayed? What happened to the officers who signed the orders? What happens when the next war needs new experiments? You won't find those answers in any archive. For that, you'd have to climb back into those mountains and listen to what the ghosts decide to tell you.